Seeing wild animals in their natural habitats is why people go on wildlife safaris. But for some, these adventures end in tragedy. Join us as we tell the stories of 5 people who came face to face with some of nature's most majestic creatures and paid the ultimate price. From eager tourists that underestimated the wild to people who were simply unlucky, these stories show that safaris can be deadly. Lisa Manders had always dreamed of visiting Africa, and when she and her husband Craig embarked on a safari trip to Zambia, it was meant to be a celebration of their love, adventure, and a once-in-a-lifetime experience. However, what began as an exciting journey into the wild soon turned into an unimaginable nightmare, one that would leave the world questioning the safety of such adventures. At 70 years old, Lisa Manders was a seasoned professional who had worked in the finance industry for over 4 decades. Born in Queens, New York, and raised in Long Island, she had built a life filled with family, travel, and a love for experiencing new cultures. She and Craig, residents of Cranford, New Jersey, had 3 children and a granddaughter. For their milestone anniversary, they decided to embark on their first ever trip to Africa, ready to discover the beauty of Zambia's Lower Zambezi National Park. On June 5th, 2024, the Manders joined a guided bushwalk, an activity that promised an up-close look at the African wilderness. Led by guides associated with African Portfolio, the tour operator that had arranged their trip, the group trekked through the national park, following signs of wildlife. Along the way, the guides noted indications of animal presence and encouraged participants to observe them. Eventually, they arrived at the bank of a body of water, where a lone hippopotamus lay partially submerged. The massive creature remained still, its eyes barely visible above the surface, giving no immediate sign of aggression. Despite the well-documented dangers of hippos, animals known to be highly territorial and responsible for multiple human deaths annually, the group was allegedly encouraged to move closer for a better view. The tour guides, at least one of them armed with a rifle, then reportedly turned and left the area, leaving Craig and Lisa behind as they lingered near the water's edge. It all happened in a horrifying instant. The seemingly peaceful hippo erupted from the water and started running toward the couple in a deadly charge. The hippo seized her in its enormous jaws, lifting her from the ground and shaking her violently. The sheer force of its bite crushed her head and body, inflicting catastrophic injuries in seconds. Craig could only watch in helpless horror as the attack unfolded. Any hope of intervention was shattered, as the tour guides, who were meant to ensure their safety, had reportedly walked away before the incident. Within moments, Lisa succumbed to her injuries, leaving Craig devastated and alone on what was meant to be a joyous journey. Craig, consumed by grief and seeking justice, filed a lawsuit against African Portfolio, alleging negligence and recklessness in failing to provide adequate safety measures. The lawsuit contended that the tour company had not properly vetted the guides or ensured that appropriate precautions were in place, thereby exposing Lisa to an avoidable and lethal encounter. While African Portfolio denied any wrongdoing, insisting that responsibility lay with the safari lodge that had provided the guides. Craig's attorneys argued that the company bore a duty of care to its clients and had failed in its obligations. Lisa's tragic death also reignited discussions about the inherent dangers of African safaris. Hippos, despite their seemingly harmless appearance, are among the most dangerous animals on the continent. Capable of reaching speeds of up to 19 miles per hour on land, they are fiercely territorial and unpredictable. Weighing as much as 7,000 pounds, their powerful jaws can snap bones with ease, and their aggression has led to fatal attacks on both tourists and locals. Despite these well-documented risks, tourists are often lured into a false sense of security during safaris, relying on guides to ensure their protection. In the wake of the attack, statements from African Portfolio and the Safari Lodge presented conflicting narratives. The tour company maintained that all safety measures had been followed and that repeated verbal warnings had been issued for guests to remain cautious. However, Craig's legal team refuted these claims, arguing that the tour guides had not only encouraged dangerous proximity to the hippo, but had also abandoned their duty when it mattered most. The lawsuit sought monetary damages, while also aiming to hold the industry accountable for safety lapses. Lisa Manders' death stands as a grim reminder of the dangerous realities of wildlife tourism. Juliana Glay Tourneau had traveled thousands of miles from her home in New Mexico to Zambia, eager to experience the country's landscapes and wildlife and spread the word of her faith. On the afternoon of June 19, 2024, She and her group found themselves near the Maramba Cultural Bridge in Livingston, watching a herd of elephants move through the area. Elephants, typically regarded as gentle and majestic creatures, are a common sight in Zambia's national parks and wildlife corridors. However, the peaceful moment took a devastating turn when the unimaginable happened. At 64 years old, Juliana was in Zambia on a mission trip, a journey driven by her deep faith and dedication to sharing biblical teachings. She had spent her life devoted to family, faith, and service, having been an active member of Center City Church in Albuquerque and a participant in Bible study fellowship for 2 decades. She had a history of supporting others, whether raising her 2 children, caring for aging parents, or teaching women about biblical hospitality. Her love for travel had taken her on many adventures, but this trip to Zambia was one with a profound purpose. That Wednesday, after a visit to Victoria Falls, she joined her group on a safari drive, eager to witness Africa's wildlife up close. As the group's vehicle approached the Maramba Cultural Bridge, it became evident they were not alone. A herd of elephants had gathered, creating a temporary roadblock. It was a known elephant corridor, and such encounters were not unusual. The vehicle came to a stop, allowing the tourists to observe the animals. 2 different versions of what happened next were made public, but they both ended the same way, in death. According to one of the versions, when the vehicle came to a stop, the tourists remained seated as they watched the animals. All of a sudden, one of the elephants became aggressive. Before anyone could react, Juliana was thrown from her seat onto the ground. What happened next was swift and brutal. The elephant trampled her, inflicting fatal injuries before the panic-stricken group could intervene. The attack occurred at approximately 5:50 p.m., and by the time help arrived, it was too late. However, this version of the tragic event was disputed by the Livingstone Tourist Association, which issued a statement criticizing this version of events as inaccurate and explaining that the death had occurred after tourists had left their vehicle in breach of national park regulations. The Livingstone Tourism Association noted that such an incident, an elephant pulling someone from a vehicle, had never been reported before in Africa or Asia. Elephants are among the most intelligent and social animals, often forming tight-knit family groups. Despite their typically non-aggressive nature, they can become unpredictable, particularly in human-populated areas, where food scarcity or past encounters with people may trigger defensive behaviors. In the aftermath of the attack, local authorities responded swiftly. The incident marked the second fatal elephant attack in Zambia that year, raising concerns about increasing human-wildlife conflict. Southern Province Police Commissioner Auxencio Daka confirmed Juliana's death, stating that the vehicle had been stopped due to elephant traffic when the attack occurred. Beyond the immediate tragedy, the attack sparked renewed discussions about the growing presence of elephants in residential and tourist areas. Some locals, like Livingstone resident Ruth Chizawa, voiced concerns about elephants damaging property while foraging for food, calling for government action to mitigate risks. For Juliana's family, the news was devastating. A devoted wife, mother, and community member, she left behind a legacy of faith and service. Her sudden death was a painful loss to those who knew her, and efforts were made to repatriate her body to the United States. Carlos Carvalho had spent decades behind the camera, capturing the beauty of nature through his lens. As an award-winning filmmaker, he had worked on numerous projects involving wildlife, his experience making him comfortable in unpredictable environments. On May 2, 2018, he was at Glen Affric Country Lodge in South Africa, filming scenes for a feature film, a task he had undertaken many times before. That day, he focused his camera on a giraffe named Gerald, intent on getting close-up footage. But in an instant, what should have been a simple shoot turned into an unforeseen encounter. 47-year-old Carlos was a respected cinematographer. Over the years, he earned recognition for his work, including a Cannes Silver Lion in 2003 for a public service announcement and an African Movie Academy Award for cinematography in the Forgotten Kingdom. His career had taken him across various landscapes, working with both actors and wild animals. Filming in natural environments came with risks, but Carlos had navigated them countless times. On this particular day, he was working as a second-unit camera operator for a feature film, shooting at the Safari Lodge. The filming had gone smoothly, and by the time the main shoot had wrapped, the animal wranglers had moved the giraffe off the set. However, Carlos decided on his own to capture additional footage. Gerald, the bull giraffe, stood towering at nearly 18 feet, his massive frame supported by long, powerful legs. While giraffes are generally not considered aggressive, males engage in a behavior known as necking, where they swing their heads in combat to assert dominance. These blows can be devastating, and the weight of their skulls, reinforced by ossicones, horn-like structures, can cause serious injuries. As Carlos positioned himself for a close-up shot, the giraffe spread its legs slightly, bent its neck, and without warning, swung its head with incredible force. The giraffe struck Carlos directly in the head, sending him flying several feet through the air before he hit the ground. Crew members nearby saw it happen in an instant. There was no time to react or intervene. The force of the blow had left him unconscious, blood seeping from his eyes and ears, an indication of severe head trauma. Despite the immediate response from the on-set paramedics, the extent of his injuries was critical. Carlos was airlifted to Mill Park Hospital in Johannesburg, where doctors fought to stabilize him. The injuries, however, were too severe. That night at 8:50 p.m., he succumbed to the trauma. The news of his death sent shockwaves through the film industry, with colleagues and friends expressing their grief. Many paid tribute to him, describing him as not only a talented cinematographer, but also a wonderful human being whose passion for storytelling had left a lasting impact. Glen Affric Country Lodge expressed deep sorrow over the incident, but maintained that Gerald would not be put down. They stated that the giraffe had acted naturally and was not at fault. An independent investigation was launched to examine the circumstances of Carlos's death, and while reports suggested he had ignored safety protocols by approaching the animal too closely, there was no official conclusion that blamed him for the accident. Carlos's death was a reminder that even creatures perceived as gentle can exhibit behaviors that, in the wrong circumstances, could prove fatal. His untimely death was a tragic consequence of the very world he sought to capture through his lens. In June 2015, a young woman drove slowly through Lion Park. Her window rolled down as she took pictures of the magnificent creatures roaming freely. Warning signs were posted everywhere, instructing drivers to keep their windows closed at all times. Yet, she, like many others before her, chose to ignore the warnings. Moments later, what began as a peaceful drive would turn into a harrowing scene of violence, one that would ultimately end in tragedy. The young woman was a 22-year-old American tourist whose visit to South Africa was meant to be a thrilling experience, an opportunity to see the country's famous wildlife firsthand. She was accompanied by a South African man, believed to be her tour guide, as they embarked on what should have been a thrilling drive through the park's enclosures. The Lion Park, a well-known attraction near Johannesburg, boasted an experience unlike any other, a chance for visitors to drive through designated areas where lions, cheetahs, and other big cats roamed freely. The facility welcomed thousands of tourists each year, promising breathtaking encounters in a controlled environment. On that fateful day, the pair entered the 20-acre lion enclosure, where several of the majestic big cats were either resting under the shade of trees or wandering along the dirt roads. Their vehicle slowly moved through the area, the woman holding her camera capturing the moment. A lioness, a powerful and agile predator, noticed the open window and began to approach the car. Lionesses, renowned for their hunting skills and sharp instincts, are the primary hunters in a pride, often targeting prey with stealth and precision. Despite the growing proximity, the young woman continued taking photographs as the lioness edged closer. And then, the lioness lunged. Witnesses later recounted seeing the big cat rise onto its hind legs, its massive frame reaching the window. In a split second, the woman was dragged partially through the opening. Her companion reacted immediately, struggling to pull her back into the vehicle, but the force of the animal was overwhelming. The attack was over in seconds, but the damage was already done. Park staff, who had been closely monitoring the area, quickly rushed to intervene. They managed to drive the lioness away and reach the victim, who lay motionless inside the vehicle. Emergency responders performed cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but her injuries were too severe. She was pronounced dead at the scene, while her companion sustained injuries to his arm in a desperate attempt to fend off the animal. He was later transported to a hospital, though his injuries were not life-threatening. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the park faced scrutiny. The management emphasized that the rules had been made clear. Signs were posted throughout the facility, leaflets were distributed at the entrance, and verbal warnings were given to visitors. Despite these measures, some tourists continued to ignore the safety protocols, drawn by the allure of an up-close experience with Africa's most dangerous predators. The lioness responsible for the attack was identified and placed in isolation, though officials confirmed there were no plans to euthanize her. The park, which had previously faced criticism for allowing close interactions with lions, defended its safety policies, but announced an internal review of its procedures. This was not the first incident of its kind at the Lion Park. Just months earlier, an Australian tourist had been bitten by a lioness after rolling down his window. Other attacks had also occurred, further highlighting the risks of such encounters. While the park assured visitors that the experience was safe if guidelines were followed, the events of that day served as a grim reminder of the consequences of underestimating nature's power. For the young woman's family, the trip had been meant to be a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, a chance to witness the beauty of Africa's wildlife. Instead, it ended in tragedy, a life cut short in a matter of moments. It was a warm Sunday morning in South Africa's Pilanesberg National Park when Carlos Luna, a 43-year-old tourist, saw an opportunity he could not resist. With his camera in hand, he set out to capture an up-close photograph of an elephant, oblivious to the consequences his decision would bring. What began as an exciting wildlife excursion soon turned into a tragic and irreversible moment, one that underlined the unforgiving nature of the wild. A resident of Egea de los Caballeros, a town near Zaragoza, Spain, Carlos was an avid traveler with a deep appreciation for nature and photography. He had traveled to South Africa with his fiancée to experience the country's renowned wildlife, joining two of her local friends for a day trip to Pilanesberg, a vast sanctuary spanning over 320 square miles. Located within the remnants of an ancient volcanic crater, the park offered a breathtaking landscape teeming with Africa's most iconic species, including elephants, rhinos, lions, and leopards. It was meant to be a day of adventure and discovery, a rare chance to witness animals in their natural habitat, while capturing unforgettable moments behind the lens. Entering the park through the Bagatla Gate, the group was immediately immersed in the beauty of the African wilderness. Not long into their drive, they came across a breeding herd of elephants gathered near a lake, a scene that instantly captivated Carlos. From the safety of their vehicle, they observed the towering creatures as they drank and played at the water's edge. Despite clear warnings that visitors should remain inside their vehicles at all times, Carlos saw an opportunity he could not ignore. He stepped out of the car, eager to capture a close-up shot of the herd, dismissing the protests of his fiancée and friends. A massive 3.5-ton matriarch stood at the center of the group, flanked by two towering adult bulls and three calves. At first, the elephants appeared calm, but any approach toward young elephants was a risk few would dare to take. The moment Carlos moved closer, the matriarch reacted. Sensing a potential threat to her calves, she charged. The two bulls followed suit. Panic surged through Carlos as he turned to flee, screaming at the top of his lungs. But the elephants were unstoppable. Within moments, they overtook him and their massive feet trampled him into the ground. The attack, though brief, left a scene of unimaginable horror. Scattered remnants of his clothing and the unmistakable marks of a violent, merciless stampede. Witnesses could do nothing but watch in helpless terror from the vehicle. Park rangers arrived within minutes, but the elephants, having neutralized the perceived threat, had already moved away into the dense bush. Carlos's fiancée and friends were left in a state of shock, their disbelief turning into grief. Emergency responders arrived at the scene, but there was nothing they could do. Carlos was gone. Elephants, particularly when accompanied by young, are among the most protective animals in the wild. A female elephant can weigh up to 4 tons and reach speeds of 25 miles per hour when charging. Bull elephants are even larger, standing as high as 13 feet and capable of inflicting devastating force. Their intelligence and deep familial bonds make them formidable defenders, reacting instinctively to any perceived danger. In the wake of the tragedy, officials from the Northwest Parks and Tourism Board expressed their condolences and reinforced the importance of park regulations. Their message was clear. These rules exist to safeguard both visitors and wildlife, and ignoring them can lead to deadly consequences. Conservation officers highlighted that the park's strict policy against exiting vehicles is there for a reason, as even the most peaceful-looking animals can become lethal in an instant. Carlos Luna's life ended in pursuit of a perfect photograph, a moment of carelessness that cost him everything.